Hello everybody, my name is Vendetta. Welcome back to another video. Today is going to be something a little bit different. In a recent video, I said Slammer is one of the best towers that you can buy in the game. But why do I say this? Well, this video is going to show you how to use the Slammer the most efficient way. I'll even show you some neat tech you can use with it, especially in Endless mode. There are several different modes that Slammer excels in, and many good reasons why you should buy it. Before we start the video, if you do like this, please consider dropping a like, commenting, or subscribing. It really helps the channel, and I do read all of your comments as well. But with that out of the way, let's just jump right into the video, shall we? So let's start off simple. What is the Slammer? Well, the Slammer is the first ever melee tower of Tower Defense X. The Slammer uses a very short range with a high damage and splash output. Top path is focused more on big damage and stunning things like bosses with its Grand Slam ability, while bottom path is focused on faster firing and stealth detection. In order to unlock the Slammer, you must be level 75 and have 22,000 gold to your name. You might be wondering why Slammer has such a high level requirement, but a low gold cost, for that level of course. Well, it's because Slammer serves as more of a cheaper early game tower, or it can be used as a spammable stun tower late game. Slammer is also very cheap to place, costing only 325 in-game cash, meaning you can use it as bait. Let's jump right into the modes that Slammer is good for. First off, easy and intermediate aren't really worth mentioning, but I suppose you could use it on intermediate on impossible maps if you wanted to. As for easy mode, it's going to do a lot in easy mode as well. But those modes are for newer players. What about some harder modes? Well, for Elite, the gameplay you're seeing in the background now, it is actually very useful. Slammer is one of the meta towers for Elite, along with John and Ghost, and is very recommended for Elite if you're going to do speedruns or hard maps. So for Elite, Slammer is definitely one of the best towers you can bring. I know you might think that Elite isn't really worth doing, as it's only Elite, it's not one of the higher endgame modes like some of the events, or Expert or Endless. But don't second guess Elite. Elite actually may be one of the best ways to grind gold if you speedrun on normal or hard maps. Speaking of Expert though, Slammer isn't as useful for Expert as there's more air enemies and overall there's lots more melee resistance, but it isn't necessarily a bad idea to bring Slammer either. As for the events, its best event is definitely Tower Battles. Slammer can easily excel in both Tower Battles Normal and Tower Battles Nightmare, especially if you place mass Slammer numbers with something to support with stealth detection like a Ghost. There are a few modes out there that Slammer can definitely feel the pain of inefficiency though. Halloween Night 3, Halloween Night 4, and Christmas Night 2 are all definitely ones that come to mind. The open battlefield does not serve the Slammer's small range well. However, for smaller maps, such as Halloween Night 1 or Christmas Night 1, I'm sure you could squeeze Slammer into there somewhere. However, its best mode definitely lies with Endless. Endless can definitely compete with Elite for how good Slammer is, but Endless is definitely very useful to bring Slammer. You can argue that Elite is actually Slammer's best mode, however Endless is definitely one of Slammer's, if not best, mode. The reason I say this is because you can use Slammer, like I mentioned earlier, with a lot of spam and just mass placement. The reason I say Endless might be one of Slammer's best modes is not for early game, but actually for late game stunning. This is where I'm going to teach you about a strategy that you can use Slammer with that is called grouping. You see, grouping is very powerful in TDX. With all the high power splash towers, you really want to make the absolute most use out of their splash. But some of the enemies in Endless are very spread out. So how are you going to do that? How are you going to make the best use out of the splash when they're all spaced apart? That is where Slammer comes in. Slammer is very powerful for these splash towers, as it can use that grouping I was talking about before. Grouping is basically when you use a splash tower to stun an enemy in front of a big line, to slow it down and overall just get it more mixed in with a group. So instead of the enemies all being spaced out, they're all clustered together. This means that you can get the maximum value out of things like helicopter, warship, and XWM turret bottom path. It's also easier for towers with Pierce to hit that second target. Now, it's important to note that there are two different kinds of enemies when it comes to stunning. The first kind that I'll be talking about, I will use a Goliath for as an example, Enemies like the Goliath have no stun resistance, meaning they can get stunned by anything that deals stun. Sounds simple, right? Well, you may notice that some abilities in the game, such as Slammer's Grand Slam ability, actually ignore stun resistance, which is actually the second kind of enemy that we're going to talk about, which I will be using an anti-golem as for an example. Anti-golems have stun resistance, meaning things like Bottom Path Grenadier and Slammer's basic attacks will not stun the anti-golem. You can simply counteract this with abilities that use ignore stun resistance, such as Slammer's Grand Slam ability, Golden Mind Layer's Throw, and more. The best way to use a Slammer for grouping depends on the kind of enemy you're dealing with. Let's start with things that have stun resistance. They're a little bit easier to deal with. To start with your grouping, you'll want to place top path Slammers throughout the path at different points. Don't put them all in a grouped up spot or super far away from each other, just close enough that you can keep stunning them consistently throughout the path. When you see a big line of anti-golems approaching your first Slammer, get ready. As soon as the first anti-golem gets in range of your Slammer, you can simply use the Grand Slam ability. If you did it correctly, you may be able to use the Grand Slam ability a second time before the first Goliath walks out of range. Once the anti-golem walks out of range of this first Slammer, you will not want to use that Slammer's Grand Slam ability again. If you do, it's only going to make it harder for you to group the rest of the anti-golems. Simply move on to your next Slammer and do the same thing, just wait for the anti-golems to come to the Slammer. Simply repeat this process with all of your Slammers, and eventually you should have a big stack of anti-golems instead of a big long spread out line. If that's what you've got, then congratulations, you've successfully done grouping. Now, for enemies that do not have stun resistance. They can be a little bit trickier, but all it is you just have to get used to it by practicing. It's important to note here that Slammer and every other stun tower in the game have a little feature that prevents stun locking. Stun locking is essentially where nothing can move because it's being stunned so many times from several different towers. To prevent this from happening, after an enemy has been stunned, they cannot be stunned from that same kind of tower for about 3 seconds. Keep this in mind, especially when you have a big wave of Goliaths coming to you. I'll be using Goliaths as an example for this one. Similar to the other example, you'll want to set up all your Slammers on top path all throughout the path. Make sure to use the most effective spots, such as corners. It's a little bit difficult to explain how to do this one, so it might just be better if you do a little bit of practice, but I will try my best to explain it as quick as I can. Simply let the Slammer do the basic attack the first time. This should stun the first Goliath. The second attack the Slammer does should not stun the Goliath. Just after the second attack, you can use the Grand Slam ability. This is the best way to actually stun these guys and group them. Now, it's important to note that you can keep this Slammer, but when the first Goliath actually runs out of the Slammer's range, you will want to delete that Slammer quickly. Same reason as before with the anti-golems, is if you keep that Slammer, it's simply going to stun the ones in the back, and it's going to make it a bit harder to group them all up. Repeat this process with all the rest of your Slammers, and you should have a nice big pack of enemies waiting for you. Grouping is simply why Slammer is one of the best towers in the game. It's just going to be overpowered for endless, especially in the later waves where there's a bunch of assailants and anti-golems and Goliaths. All those things can be a big pain to deal with, but Slammer makes it an absolute joke. Not necessarily for the damage that Slammer deals, just the stun, so it can work together with things like Helicopter, Warship, Golden Mind Layer, and more. Aside from all the things I've mentioned before, Slammer is pretty good in every other mode. If it's not amazing or it's not terrible, it holds up well. It pulls decent weight. I do want to note that there are a few maps that Slammer is not as effective on. Apocalypse is notable here, as you may think that Apocalypse is a good map for Slammer, but for whatever reason you actually can't place Slammer close to the path on that one, so I wouldn't recommend bringing Slammer to that map. Any other map out there that has little to no corners is also not great for Slammer, but Slammer still can be used if you want to. Simply put, the Slammer will do better the more of the path it can see. Just try messing around with the Slammer a little bit and how the stuns work, and eventually you should become a Slammer stun pro. That's going to be all for this video. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I hope this helps you at least a little bit in learning something new about Slammer, and if it didn't, that's okay. Thank you for watching anyways. Let me know if there's any other towers you would like me to make this kind of video for, but other than that, thank you all so very much for watching. This has been Vendetta, and we will see you all next time. Bye-bye.